Good evening. I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. On a wintry night, I'm joined by Mary Kissel, the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal and the host of Opinion Journal, each day at 1 p.m. at WSJ.com. And tonight, most importantly, Floridian, a person who's comfortable talking Florida politics. Mary, good evening to you.
Good evening. I wish I were down there right now, John.
I understand every once in a while, though I don't know much about Florida except for my visits to Disney World when my children were young. There was that moment when you get off the airplane and you realize, this is the same day I left in New York. How is it that they can live like this?
Exactly. I have 4 layers of clothing on, and now I'm stepping off into a warm bath.
Yes, and you think to yourself, is it like this all the time? I mean...
And what am I doing?
Why am I not doing this? But tonight, we're in New York, and it's wintry. However, we're going immediately to Florida because there is a special election. The death of longtime admired and celebrated Representative C.W. Bill Young several weeks ago, at the end of the 2013, left the Republican Party and the Democratic Party both choosing candidates for a special election. That means there'll be a general election come November, so whoever wins this will face the opponent probably one more time this year. We're looking at this special election because a very prominent Democrat in Florida, named Sink, is running for a congressional seat. And Mary, is it an issue in Florida, your opinion, that Ms. Sink did not live in the district when she filed to run for election?
It's not my. It's a fact, John.
I understand, but is it your opinion that is?
It's kind of like the Cheney woman.
Is
in
that
Wyoming.
Useful or bad in Florida? People care where your address is in Florida.
Well, I think for her, she was nominated because of the name recognition, not
because she lost for the governor.
Right, so she's a statewide name, known in the district even if she wasn't residing there.
The Republican candidate, there is a third candidate, but much as most third candidates, he's a single issue, and we're going to focus on the two major parties. The Republican candidate is a man who's never run for public office before, but he is a very familiar to Pinellas County political actor because he worked for Mr. Young. And we welcome Rick Outzen, the publisher of Independent News in Pensacola, which is up the Gulf of Mexico coast a bit, because when Mary and I are in trouble for Florida, we go to Rick and say what's going to happen. Mr. Outzen, a very good evening to you. I won't ask you what your weather is. It's too offensive to talk about. So what instead I'll do is go to the weather in the 13th Florida. This race right now looks to be very difficult to call because both sides are worried about the turnout model. I'll start with Alex Sink. Is she a popular figure throughout the state? She did lose the governorship, but has she recovered? Good evening to you, Rick.
Good evening. Thank you for having me on. And Mary, it's good to talk to you again. I've always enjoyed being with both of you. Alex is a popular name. As far as a person, not so much. She was the chief financial officer of the state, the only Democrat in the cabinet 4 years ago. She ran for governor against Rick Scott, which she should have won, but she didn't. And she didn't win because she's extremely dull. She doesn't play well. She's bright. She worked for Bank of America. She's intelligent, she's smart, but she doesn't come across well. She's not a warm person. On paper, she looks good, but beyond that, nothing more.
Rick, that's really saying something, given that the governor himself doesn't really set your hair on fire.
Well, it really is.
No slight intended there to the governor.
Well, and you and I have talked about it before. Rick Scott is probably about has one of the lowest approval ratings of any governor, with one of the best economic records. And but Alex Sink chose not to run against him, but to run in this very small House race. She's known well in the Tampa Bay area where this district is, but she's just not. She doesn't come across well to independent voters, and she does well with women, but not that well enough to win a big election.
Nationalizing elections can be successful. I recently saw, and I wish I could pull it up, but I can't, that the Republicans or an outside committee had cut what you'd have to say is a generic Affordable Care Act ad. in which the question was asked repeatedly in a woman's voice, do you want to vote for somebody who is in favor of this? And then it ran down what you'd say is the pirating act of the Affordable Care Act that changes the threats, the lies, or the deceptions. That's the polite word. Rick, does that matter to Tampa? I don't know. You know this area. Mary tells me that they drive down, what, Mary? I-75?
I-75.
They drive down I-75 from Chicago area, and they're just happy, Ohio area, and they're happy to be in the good temperatures. Are they paying attention to that, the argument over the ACA?
That district, the last two presidential elections, went for Obama, not by a lot, but they did go with Obama. So I'm not sure what the temperature is right now, whether that will be a decisive decision or not, because it's been down the line. They voted for George W. Bush before that, but it's always been very, very close. The turnout is going to be interesting to see. This is a March 11th election. How many people show up? I know the Republican Party and the chamber, the Florida chamber and the national chamber are investing money into this. And to the Republican side, you got the unions on the Democratic side. They want this to be a bellwether election. Right now, it is a dead heat.
Well, on that, I'm reading from the Tampa Bay Times, and they put forth some numbers on that spending to quantify it here. Democratic groups have spent about $3.7 million in TV ads compared to about $2.5 million by Jolly and Republican groups. So a lot of money going in here.
Right.
Are there recent polls, Rick, that show them neck and neck, or is that just a feeling that you have?
No, it is. There's a polling group that I have used a lot in elections, and they're very accurate. Even they go against some of the other groups. It's the St. Pete polls, and let me see if I can pull up the latest numbers. I had it on my computer just a minute ago, but they did a poll on just a couple weeks ago. Actually did it this week, and they came out with Jolly at 46.2 and Sink at 44%. With about 3.4, a little bit to the Libertarian, and then 3.4 to the undecided. So it's a dead heat right now. And St. Pete Polls has done a real good job. I've watched them over the years and used them myself, and so I think that's accurate. There've been a couple polls. St. Pete Times had 2 weeks ago or last week had Sink way ahead, but that sample size is only 600 voters, and this other one's about 1,100. So
David Jolly, I watched the debate that was held in Florida, I think last week, and you can see the whole thing up. It's 58 minutes. David Jolly is not a politician who's comfortable. In fact, I could say he's not quite a politician yet. Is that an issue in Tampa? He answers carefully, but it's memorized, and he doesn't make eye contact. Now, I understand Alex Sink. Yes, she's cautious in some fashion. You can't really understand why she's on the stage. She answers correctly, however. But David Jolly seemed to be a man who didn't want to be in the room. Rick, is that an issue?
Well, he's a longtime aide of Young. I think he worked for him for like 20 years. And John and Mary too, that it's a difference between the guy behind the candidate and being the candidate. And I think he's got it. The reason he won the Republican primary because Republicans honor people's service. So I think the hardcore Republicans in that district preferred him over everyone else. I think that the Republican Party will win in this. I think there's still Republicans have held that seat since 1954. So I want to believe that that's going to stay that way. I don't see this huge wave to want to go Democratic in Tampa. So I think that Jolly will probably win it because he's already made up a whole lot of ground in a very short period of time.
Well, gosh, nominating the next guy in line hasn't worked out so well for the Republicans on the national scale.
One way we can spin this, Rick, is a way I read it, is that if the Republicans lose, it's a shrug. Because it's a special, and Jolly will go back up against in November. And if Sink loses it, there'll be banner headlines. Absolutely banner headlines.
Well, you're probably right, because we know. I think all of us that look at what's going to happen this fall, it's going to be a different dynamic when you have when the entire Republican Party and a third of the House is up, or the House is up there, and a third of the Senate is running for re-election, people are going to be very focused on party.
And you have a governor's race.
Right.
And
right.
so the turnout for the governor and the Republicans will be heavy in November. That's why it doesn't really seem to practice for anything. It just almost seems like we're going through an exercise here.
Well, it could be, though, couldn't it? I mean,
if
Rick,
Sink loses,
yeah,
yes.
if Sink loses. I mean,
Right.
Rick, for those out there who don't know Tampa, it's not just retirees. You've got the military, you've got young people, you have immigrants there. I mean, doesn't that say something? Or won't that, in and of itself, send a message to Democrats if Sink loses?
You're right. It's a dynamic city that has a pretty strong economy, so it could have a huge say. What I find interesting is that we're not seeing any presence of the Tea Party in that district at all, which is a different dynamic too. They're going to be fighting for the middle, and Alex Sink did not do a good job on the statewide side. She's not. I mean, she's a good person. She's smart. I think on paper she looks very strong, but she's not inspirational. I mean, I watched that debate too, John, and you have to say she didn't inspire people to want to go out and vote.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people reaching for marijuana when she answered the marijuana question. Yes, of course.
I don't think that's legal yet, John.
I know, but
not legal yet in
the
Florida.
way she answered the question, everybody had a medical excuse.
Well, if they were in Tampa, they're reaching for cigars.
It took her so long. Okay, Rick, we'll be back to you on this. Rick Outzen, the publisher of the Independent News in Pensacola, Mary Kissel, the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal, and most importantly, a Floridian who can speak to the facts of the very dynamic elections in Florida. They're unpredictable. I'm John Batchelor.